Many years ago, the story of the two-day 1913 senior TT race, well over a century, two tragic world wars and millions of lives ago, in the early Neo-Georgian years, as Robert Graves calls them, the pattern of daily life in Britain was very different. But, you know, motorcycle sport, and the spirit that goes with it, has not changed very much. Those of you who witnessed the fantastic MV duel between Halewood and Hocking, whose screaming red machine seemed invisibly tied for lap after lap over the mountain course, will probably doubt if such spectacularly close racing was seen in the pioneer days. Decades ago there were no streamliners streaking down to signpost at three-figure speeds, but there was a terrific Rudge Scott scrap, and this article is written mainly around Tim Wood's reminiscences, which proved remarkably accurate when compared with contemporary race reports in pre-Kaiser War motorcycle journals. Senior riders were set off at 20-second intervals, starting it on Wednesday, and at 3:10 p.m. a stop signal was shown, and no riders were allowed to commence their second or third laps. After 3:55 p.m. all competitors were stopped by the red flag at Wollaston Corner. Quoting the words of the 1913 press, all those who complete the first day's race, or the fastest 75%, whichever number is the smaller, shall be eligible to start in the second day's race. Qualifying machines were impounded immediately upon finishing, no attention allowed, not even refueling, and stored under guard in tents until the restart on Friday. Apprehensive riders had to wheel them out and pray that enough petrol and oil remained or, of course, water after the intervening 40-odd hours. The luckless ones with tank leakage or engine trouble rode, if they could, and pushed if they couldn't, to the first fuel depot at Braddon. The other was at Ramsey. If they wished to make adjustments at the start, they could do so at the roadside, after they had been given the official flag and the stopwatch was ticking against them. There were just over 100 entries in the senior class, the only one described here, including the following: 12 Rudges, the largest entry of any one make, 11 Triumphs, 8 engines, 8 BSAs, 5 Ariels, 4 Zeniths, 4 Singers, 4 Matchlesses, 4 Premiers, 3 Rovers, 3 Nortons, 3 Blumfields, 3 Martin Japs, 3 Quadrants, an inappropriate number, 2 each of Aldays, Putch, Bat, NSU and KN machines, a hot favorite, Ouch, and 1 each of Mead, Precision, Regal, Precision, Regal, Green, Peerless, Dot, New Imperial, ABC, ASL and Bruff models, the latter ridden by George Bruff himself. Oh, yes, I almost forgot. There were 4 of those water-cooled 2-stroke twins from Yorkshire. 2 were entered by the Scott Engineering Company Limited, and ridden by H.O. Tim Wood and J. Fluffy Longfield, and the others were entered by their riders, Appleby and Percy Butler. Since we of the clan are mainly interested in the Scott contingent, let us forget the 90-odd other hopefuls in the island that week, and look in at the Prince of Wales, Ramsey, where Alfred Scott and all the riders and mechanics were staying. Their depot was at the back of the hotel, surrounded by rowing boats and a smell of tar, and very, very close to the sea. A little too close, in fact. The gaffer of the hotel owned a magnificent Dion car, which was kept on the quayside behind the building, near the lifeboat launching ramp. One fine morning Tim Wood and Percy Butler were up and about early, and they made their way round to the Scott stables among the boats and coils of rope. For some reason or other, they had to move the Dion, and pushed it out of the way, Percy at the wheel. Unfortunately, they moved it onto a downward grade which led to the slope into the sea, and before the horrified eyes of its owner, at the rear window of the hotel, the car rolled down into the sea and was almost completely submerged. They had to wait until the tide went out before it could be pushed ashore again. The bill for renovation probably went down to race expenses. 1913 TT. The racing Scotts were very similar to the 1912 machines, with a few detail alterations. Fork blades were straight instead of curved, a feature which appeared on production models in the autumn, and dual ignition was employed. One plug at the rear directly above the transfer port and the other above the exhaust port, angled out at about 10 degrees. Special 4-spark Bosch magnetos have been ordered for the race. But, alas, they did not arrive in time, and plug troubles with the normal magneto were experienced. 2-spark ignition really did increase the Scott's power and speed, as they proved beyond all doubt in works tests. Other equipment included a Scott carburetor, Brooks saddle and Reliance plugs, Castrol oil, Shell spirit, Palmer tires and a new type of Renault chain were used. The rotary distribution valve was driven via a train of spur gears, and the two-speed gear ratios of 3.1 and 4.56 to 1. Some slogger. All the machines were registered for road use. The island roads in 1913 were, in many places, particularly down a mountain, little more than horse tracks. They were stony and rutted, with grass verges, and two very deep ruts, where the cartwheels ran. In between, the ground was flinty and chopped to a rough rubble by horses' hooves. During practice, Tim cut one of his tires, and the inner tube, completely in two, near some slate workings by the bungalow. For his own benefit as much as everyone else's, Fluffy Longfield organized a team of about 100 lands to clear the large stones and flints from the track between Kate's cottage and the bungalow, an action much appreciated by all the riders. Longfield himself tried to learn the course the hard way and crashed rather badly at Kirkbraden during practice, bending his Scott and hurting one arm. After that he toured round on a sidecar outfit, getting the hang of things and saving his energy for race days. The Scott riders had their share of troubles during practice, making necessary evening work at the Ramsey depot. Some of the engines have been tightening up, so the blocks were carefully lapped, and compression blocks fitted below the pistons. Top speed on the flat in Yorkshire was recorded as 65 miles per hour, but with these blocks 70 miles per hour was possible. Almost 5 mph, claimed Alfred Scott, was lost by the non-arrival of the four-spark magnetos, and it was obvious that the top speed of some of the four-strokes, notably Rudge's, was greater. By comparison with the Scott, however, they were harder to throw around corners, so it looked as though riding ability could level things up a bit. Tim Wood had proved his ability on fast test runs in Yorkshire, the reason he had been selected to ride in the island, plus of course, the fact that he had a sound knowledge of the Scott, through helping to build it during the other 50 weeks of the year. For the race itself, the weather was beautiful, a real English summer. No, wait a minute, I don't mean that, I mean it didn't rain. The junior qualifying race was held on Wednesday morning, and the senior in the afternoon. First man away, on account of his 1912 win, was Frank Appleby on LH5, followed 20 seconds later by F. Bateman, Rudge, who had actually passed Appleby before Ballacrane. That didn't look so good. Appleby, however, regained his position on the mountain, only to be passed again before the end of the lap. Longfield was 7th away, but suffered persistent plug trouble, as, indeed, did Appleby. These two riders once touched at speed during the race, and wobbled alarmingly. Percy Butler was 53rd man away from the start, and Tim Wood 74th. Percy Butler was started near Harry Reid, another huge rider, these two heavyweights being almost inseparable in motorcycling events. The positions at the end of the first lap were unlikely to be toasted at Ramsey. Rudge machines occupy the first 4 places, followed by 2 engines, a Matchless and a Dot. The Scots ridden by Appleby and Longfield were not living up to their reputation, and the other 2 riders on Scott machines had the benefit of the dust thrown up by several dozen earlier starters. Tim Wood, nevertheless, distinguished himself by moving up several places. At the end of lap 2 he lay in second position between the leading and third place Rudges ridden by Shared and Bateman respectively. The other Scots were nowhere. The mountain road was scattered with derelicts, and all the trade teams were in trouble. A tremendous duel was taking place between the Rudge and Indian riders, with a single, buzzing, foreigner setting the pace. The feature of the last lap of the eliminating trial was the marvelous ride of Wood, Scott. Those who saw him at Sulby Bridge said he appeared to go round at an absolutely impossible angle, yet he did it. His last lap was indeed an absolute record for the course, the time being 43 minutes 10 seconds, 52.12 miles per hour. Motorcycling, the 10th of June, 1913, a remarkable ride, indeed, for a first-timer who had started in 74th position and battled past so many riders. He didn't quite catch Bateman, Rudge, on the roads, although he passed him by nearly 4 minutes on time. As the speedy Scott was stored away for the off day, Tim noted that he had run out of oil. Appleby had broken his front forks, which put him out of the running. Percy Butler suffered plug trouble and eventually the magneto timing slipped. and Longfield cut a tyre clean in two, despite his pre-race precautions, and had to retire. Thus it was that one lonely Scot was left to struggle against the mighty singles, for the last laps of the 1913 Senior. By virtue of his win on Wednesday, Tim got a good start on Friday, and he set out to beat the lap record yet again. Unfortunately, fate decided that his freedom from trouble was not to continue. He had to make a first lap stop at Bratton for fuel, oil and water, and had got going really well once again when a flying flint pierced the water hose near the top of the pot, right up in the inaccessible slot of the radiator, but Tim didn't know that. The weather, which had threatened to be bad, cleared up, and when Tim got to Ramsey, he had to stop and make hasty repairs, with insulating tape, to the radiator hose. There was a metal tube inside the hose, to stiffen it, and if he could have got copper wire around and tightened it below the split, all would have been well, but it was impossible to get it during pit stops, of which he now had to make 2 on each circuit. At the end of the first lap, Bateman led on his Rudge, followed by Alexander on an Indian and Ray Abbott on another Rudge. Tim Wood was fourth. Alexander, riding a 1911 twin-cylinder Indian, took the lead at Ramsey. Bateman, a 22-year-old Rudge Company employee, struggled hard to regain the lead, and made it by Keppelgate. Trying to pass another rider, he got into a rut at the side of the road, and for 200 yards fought to gain control, at a reported speed of 70 miles per hour. He struck the bank, was thrown badly, and sustained terrible injuries from which he died. A fatality which cast a gloom over the whole event. Alexander was left in the lead, but a choked carburetor slowed him down and allowed both Abbott and Wood to repass. Ray Abbott had to stop for belt and plug changes, and lost some time. Tim had to make his regular refill and rebind stop, and lost nearly twice as much time as Abbott. 10 minutes against 5 seconds only separated the first 3 riders, Wood on his Scott, Abbott on a Rudge and Alexander going well again on his Indian. The fourth man was over 5 minutes astern, while less than half a minute I covered the first 3 places. Excitement began to increase as Abbott clearly gained on Wood at the start of the last lap. Tim, 50 years later, recalls, "I knew how close a thing it was, with only seconds to spare. If I stopped," he told me, "I should almost certainly lose, and yet I might seize up if I didn't. Anyway, I decided to press on as fast as possible and risk it. I remember coming over the mountain flat out and catching a bunch of riders near Windy Corner. In order to get past, I went into the side of the road and down into the gutter with a bang. I held on, wobbled past them somehow, and managed to get back on the road ahead of them. It was as close as this. At Ramsey, Abbott was just in the lead. At the bungalow there was next to nothing in it. It was a matter of yards, of precious fractions of each second. Riding to the limit, Abbott ran off the course at the corner above Bray Hill and stalled his engine. He got going again and finished amidst a storm of cheers. Had he won? In order to beat him, Tim had to arrive at the start in less than 1 minute 40 seconds. Could he do it? Riding desperately to bring home the one Scot left in the race, Tim overdid it, and within 2 miles of the finish, he, too, overshot a corner, but he managed to keep the engine running, hurled the Scot back on the course and tore down to the finish. At the foot of Bray Hill he was doing over 70. Heaven help that dry water-cooled engine, and he had just 10 seconds in which to finish. 7, 6, 5. And as the 5th second passed, Tim won his first TT senior race by the narrowest margin seen up to that time. A great race, and the crowd gave a great ovation. Ray Abbott, probably disappointed, but a grand sportsman, described his ride as a glorious blind. "Never enjoyed anything so much in my life."